Before you call me cruel, answer one question. How long should a woman smile beside a husband who makes her feel dull in her own home? I did not betray him. I gave him 12 years, a beautiful house, and a social life he never had the imagination to create for himself. If I laughed at my stupid husband while our new neighbor watched, that was honesty, not humiliation. Ryan made me feel visible in 5 minutes, while my husband had spent years treating every emotion like a loose screw he could tighten. My husband only gave me that small, patient smile and kept holding his paper plate, because silence was the only argument he ever knew how to win. By sunset, I was certain every person at our barbecue would finally understand why I deserved better. My name is Paloma Reyes. I was 37, and I ran community relations for a regional home builder outside Raleigh. My job was to enter a room full of strangers and make them feel as if the room had been built for them. Attention was a kind of currency. I knew how to spend it. My husband, Grant, was 41 and supervised maintenance for 6 county libraries. He could repair a damaged roof, calm an angry contractor, or find the one bad wire inside a wall. He could not sit beside a crying woman without reaching for a solution. Of course, people called him dependable. They used that word as if it covered every silence he brought home. We had been together 12 years and married for 9. What we had was real once. During our first summer in Hawthorne Circle, we owned 4 plastic chairs and a grill that leaned to the left. Grant cooked burgers for 8 neighbors in the rain while I held an umbrella over him. We laughed until the buns turned wet. The next morning, I bought him a mustard yellow apron with a crooked black grill stitched across the chest. He wore it at every barbecue after that, even when the pocket began to tear. I came from a house where being overlooked meant being safe. My mother cleaned hotel rooms and taught me never to trouble people with what I wanted. By 37, I had built a life where nobody forgot I was present. Was it wrong to expect my husband to see what everyone else saw? Grant said he saw me. His proof was always practical. When I told him our marriage had become flat, he created a shared calendar for date nights. When I said I missed feeling wanted, he booked dinner for every second Thursday. He believed planning was the same as passion. I believed he used planning to avoid the risk of wanting anything out loud. That spring, I decided our annual barbecue would be the largest event Hawthorne Circle had held. 40 guests, a rented speaker, games for the children, proper lighting along the fence. I made 2 lists, then a third when Grant asked how many people might stay after dark. He gave me his small, patient smile and wanted exact names, not estimates. I assumed he was worrying about chairs and trash bags. Of course he was. Grant could turn pleasure into inventory before the first drink was poured. Dana Whitmore, my closest friend on the street, helped me choose tablecloths on our patio. She was 38, bored in her own marriage, and treated my confidence like a program she could borrow. She said the party needed one person who was fun enough to pull everyone outside. She meant me. Grant heard her while he folded the yellow apron over the back of a chair. His smile appeared, quiet and thin. Then he asked whether I had included the new owner of number 18. The new owner was Ryan Cho. I had seen him twice beside a dark green pickup, carrying boxes alone. He was tall, recently divorced, and comfortable in his body, in a way Grant had never been comfortable anywhere. Ryan looked across the street while Grant spoke and held my eyes for 1 second too long. I added his name to the list. One new neighbor could change the mood of a whole street, and I intended to make him feel welcome. Ryan's sprinkler pipe broke 4 days later. Water ran across his lawn and gathered at the curb. I crossed the street in sandals because he was standing beside the valve with mud on his shirt and no idea where the shutoff was. Grant came behind me with a metal key and closed the water in less than a minute. Ryan thanked him, but he looked at me when he said Hawthorne Circle had become more interesting since he arrived. I told him the street needed help. Grant cared about drainage and recycling schedules. Someone else had to provide a pulse. Grant gave that small smile. He wiped the key on his jeans and asked Ryan to call him if the pipe leaked again. I heard no objection, so I kept going. I told Ryan that my husband could make a safety lesson out of opening a bottle. Ryan laughed. 2 laughs from me, 1 from him. Grant did not join us. Later, Grant asked why I needed to make him smaller whenever another person showed interest in me. His question was too large, so I reduced it. I told him he was turning a harmless joke into a marriage problem. He asked whether harmless things normally required one person to be embarrassed. I said embarrassment was his choice. That was how Grant and I spoke by then. He named an action. I judged his reaction. We could spend an hour on the same sentence and never meet inside it. Ryan began joining us for small neighborhood gatherings. He designed commercial outdoor spaces and knew how to make ordinary places look expensive. At Dana's porch drinks, he described a hotel courtyard he had created with fire bowls and tall grass. He said my work sounded similar because we both made people want to belong somewhere. Grant had never described my work that way. He usually asked whether my events had stayed under budget. Ryan spoke about his divorce without anger. He said his former wife had wanted a louder life than he could give her, so they had stopped forcing the same house to hold 2 different futures. I admired how clean he made it sound. There were no years of small failures in his version, only 2 adults brave enough to admit the fit was wrong. When he listened, he leaned forward and waited instead of offering a task. I began giving him truths I had stopped giving Grant. Not secrets, exactly. Better edited versions of my marriage. Ryan's flaw was that he left any conversation when it became difficult, but I called that emotional maturity because it never required me to defend myself. Dana watched Ryan watch me. On the walk home, she said marriage did not cancel the need to be admired. She also said Grant might benefit from remembering that other men were not blind. Her own husband had gone inside early. That made her advice easier to give. The next Friday, Ryan asked through the neighborhood group chat where he could buy mature jasmine. I sent the name of a nursery in a private message. Then I added that he should take me because the owner always gave me a better price. I stared at the screen for 6 seconds before deleting the second line. I sent only the nursery name. It was not guilt. It was discipline. I wanted the pleasure without creating evidence that could be made ugly. Ryan answered that he owed me a drink. I did not delete that. At a block committee meeting, Ryan returned a long aluminum level to Grant. He thanked him for explaining the drainage slope and for introducing him to a contractor who did not overcharge. The easy confidence in Ryan's voice changed when he spoke to my husband. It became respect. The shape did not fit my picture of either man, so I called them the Neighborhood Tool Club and asked whether membership required boring shoes. Ellen Price sat beside us and looked down at her coffee. She was a widow in her 60s, and Grant had repaired her porch rail after her husband died. Ellen disliked conflict because grief had already taken enough noise from her life. She did not defend him. She did not laugh either. Grant smiled and placed the level carefully inside its case. Then he asked Ellen whether she and her son were still free late on the night of the barbecue. She said they were. He asked the same question of Mrs. Alvarez and the Morgan brothers before we left. I assumed he was building a cleanup crew. Counting helped me when rooms became uncertain. 3 neighbors, 4 careful answers. Nobody asked what I needed after the party. The private drink with Ryan happened 2 nights later. Dana was supposed to come, but she left after 20 minutes because her daughter called. I stayed on Ryan's patio. He poured 1 glass of wine, and we talked about places we wanted to see. He said Grant seemed like a decent man. I replied that decency was useful but not exciting. When Ryan asked whether Grant and I were happy, I said we lived more like project partners than lovers. That was not a complete lie. It was a selected truth, which is what good communication often is. I went home at 11. Grant was in the living room with the lamp off. He asked why I had told him Dana was staying when she had returned home hours earlier. I asked whether he was monitoring the street now. He said Dana's husband had brought over a misdelivered package and mentioned she was asleep. 1 simple fact. No accusation. I told Grant that his suspicion was exactly why I needed people who did not make me report every minute. He asked whether I had been alone with Ryan. I said nothing happened. He asked again, more precisely, whether I had been alone. I admitted that I had, then accused him of caring more about the schedule than about why I did not want to come home. Grant's smile appeared again, but it did not reach his eyes. He said my reason could explain my choice without making the choice respectful. Then he went upstairs. For 2 days, he spoke only about groceries and the barbecue list. I treated that as defeat. Silence was Grant's oldest hiding place, and I was tired of crawling inside to find him. So I expanded my plan. I asked Ryan to help design the patio layout for the party. If Grant saw how easily another man understood me, perhaps he would finally decide to become interesting. The planning meeting took place at the small pavilion beside our community garden. The air smelled of wet soil and cut mint. I brought coloured cards for the food stations, sample lights, and a printed map of our yard. Grant brought an extension cord tester and a first aid kit. He set both on the supply table as if we were preparing for a flood. Ryan arrived in a fitted blue shirt. Dana nudged my arm when he bent over the patio map. I placed him beside me and moved Grant to the far end with Ellen, where he could discuss power outlets without slowing the creative work. We disagreed about the grill. Grant wanted it near the stone wall, away from the children's game. Ryan thought it would look better in the center of the patio, where the cook could talk to everyone. I said Ryan understood that a grill was part of the party, not a dangerous machine under investigation. Several people smiled. Grant explained the wind direction and the dry cedar fence. His tone stayed even. That made it easier to turn him into the joke. I lifted the mustard yellow apron from my supply bag and told the group we needed a grill captain who could create heat without reading 6 pages of warnings. Then I tied the apron around Ryan. It was only for the planning photograph. That was my explanation. Ryan held both hands away from his body while I pulled the strings behind him. Dana laughed first. I said the apron already looked better on a man who knew how to have fun. The laughter that followed was thin. Ellen moved her chair. Mrs. Alvarez pressed her lips together. Ryan looked toward Grant as if he needed permission he had not considered before. My husband stood near the supply table. He gave me the same patient smile. Then he closed the first aid kit, lined its edge with the table, and asked Ellen whether the back gate would be clear that Saturday. Ellen said her son would handle it. Grant thanked her. I read his calm as surrender. He had lost the room because he did not know how to claim it. The photograph went into the neighborhood group chat that evening. Ryan wore Grant's apron. I stood beside him with one hand on his shoulder. Grant appeared behind us, half cut from the frame. The image collected 12 laughing reactions and 3 comments about our new grill team. I spent the next hour arranging those reactions into proof. 12 people had laughed. 3 had praised the picture. Only Ellen had said nothing. At work, that response rate would have counted as success, and I treated my marriage like one more room whose mood I could measure. I drafted a caption for the main barbecue that named Ryan as the new energy on our street. Then I deleted the word new because it made my intention too clear. The final caption promised a changing of the guard at the grill. It sounded playful. Playful language was useful because anyone who objected looked severe. Grant saw the post while we were still at the pavilion. He asked me to remove the photograph. I told him the neighbors already loved it. He wanted to know whether their laughter mattered more than his request. I said a secure man would laugh too. The answer was clean, familiar, and strong enough to end the discussion without answering him. Dana sent me a private message saying the photograph was dangerous in the best way. I answered that perhaps a little danger would wake Grant up. Her next response took an hour. She said I should make sure I knew what I wanted. That was less support than I expected, but Dana became nervous whenever a joke stopped being theoretical. Grant waited until we were home before asking to speak. He sat on the back steps, where the porch light attracted small moths. He asked whether I had brought the apron specifically to place it on Ryan. I told him the picture needed personality. He said the apron came from our first summer in the house and asked whether that mattered to me at all. Of course it mattered. That was why using it worked. The whole point was to show him how far we had moved from those wet burgers and plastic chairs. I told him an apron was not a marriage. He said no, but the person I had chosen to embarrass was. I answered that he had embarrassed himself by standing there like an employee waiting for instructions. He asked me not to use him as part of my flirtation with Ryan again. I heard the word flirtation and smiled. Finally, something human. Jealousy was ugly, but at least it had heat. I asked whether he was afraid Ryan could offer me more. Grant said he was afraid I had already decided respect was something he had to earn from me every morning. For one breath, I saw the man from our first barbecue. Rain on his hair. One hand protecting the cheap grill flame. He had never asked anyone to notice what he did. I reached toward him. Then he gave me that patient smile again. It closed the opening. The smile looked superior now, as if he had already judged me and found me small. I pulled my hand back and told him that if he wanted respect, he could stop behaving like the least alive person on the street. Grant looked at the dark yard. He said he had spent years trying to keep our life running because every time he stopped, I blamed him for the mess. His sadness was plain, but sadness without action had stopped moving me. I told him he was doing it again, making himself the tired victim while I carried every relationship we had. The next morning, I asked Ryan to help me plan a special grill moment for the barbecue. I wanted music, a crowd, and a playful handover from Grant to him. Nothing cruel, just a visible contrast. I also asked Dana to prepare a short introduction about how Hawthorne Circle needed fresh blood. She sent back a laughing symbol but no words. I wrote the introduction myself. Each draft became sharper. Grant was careful. Ryan was alive. Grant kept things safe. Ryan made them worth attending. By the fifth version, the comparison sounded like a verdict delivered with a smile. That was the tone I wanted. Ryan met me once more at the patio to review the lighting plan. He stayed on the opposite side of the table and kept our conversation on cable lengths. When I moved closer, he shifted the map between us. I told myself he was protecting me from gossip. The possibility that he was protecting himself did not deserve space in my plan. Ryan replied after 4 hours. He said he would help with the layout, but did not want to be placed between a wife and her husband. I decided Grant had spoken to him. It was the only explanation that protected the version of myself Ryan had enjoyed. So I changed the plan. I would not warn either man. Surprise created honest reactions, and honest reactions were what I sold for a living. During the week before the barbecue, our garage began to look different. Grant moved his power tools from the wall rack into black cases. He sorted winter coats into clear bags and placed books in square brown boxes. When I asked why, he said Mrs. Alvarez was helping him clear space and that several things would be leaving after Saturday. I assumed he meant donations. Hawthorne Circle held a charity collection every summer, and Grant always gave away something useful. Of course he did. He was generous with objects because objects never asked him to explain himself. My mother came on Wednesday to help prepare empanadas. Carmen Reyes was 63 and still believed a marriage survived through quiet endurance. I expected her to admire the lights across the patio. Instead, she showed me the photograph of Ryan in the yellow apron. Ellen had sent it to her after the planning meeting. My mother asked whether I had meant to make Grant look foolish. I told her Grant had managed that without my help. She set down the tray she was carrying. Then she said there was a difference between wanting a husband to become more present and enjoying the sight of other people laughing at him. That sentence irritated me because it was too clean. My mother had spent years making herself invisible beside my father and called the result loyalty. I told her I would not disappear to protect a man's pride. She asked whether being visible required placing my foot on Grant's neck. I counted the empanadas instead of answering. 24 on the first tray. 18 on the second. My mother covered both and left before dinner. Grant came home while I was hanging glass lights from the fence. He stood below the ladder and held it without being asked. His hands were steady. When I climbed down, he said my mother had called him. I accused him of collecting allies. He said Carmen had wanted to know whether he was safe to talk honestly in his own house. The phrase sounded dramatic. Nobody had silenced Grant. He had simply spent years choosing not to speak. He named the pattern then. He reminded me of the dinner where I imitated the way he spoke to contractors. The school fundraiser where I told 3 mothers that he needed a written procedure for kissing. The Christmas party where I introduced him as the man who inspected fun for safety problems. Each event had seemed small because I had stored it separately. Grant had kept them together. I told him he should have said something sooner. He answered that he had, many times, but always softly because volume frightened me. That was true. My father had filled our childhood home with shouting, and Grant knew I shut down when a man raised his voice. His gentleness had once made me trust him. Later, it made him easy to ignore. Grant asked whether I liked him when nobody else was watching. He did not ask whether I loved him. The smaller word hurt more. I offered a compromise. I said I would stop messaging Ryan alone and would not touch him at the barbecue. In return, Grant needed to smile, stay close to me, and stop acting wounded in front of the neighbors. I presented it as care. It was really stage direction. His patient smile came back. He said he did not need a better performance from me. He needed the public disrespect to stop. I told him he was refusing a fair offer because victimhood finally gave him attention. The smile vanished. He went into the garage. Later that night, I found the yellow apron inside one of the brown boxes. It had been washed. Grant had folded it around an old photograph from our first summer in the house. In the picture, he was laughing under my umbrella while rain ran off the broken grill lid. My handwriting on the back recorded the date and called it the first of many perfect disasters. The garage was quiet except for the refrigerator motor. I stood there with the apron against my chest. For a few seconds, the packed tools and folded coats formed one clear shape. A life could be removed, one useful piece at a time. Grant did not need to shout. He could simply stop belonging to the rooms he had maintained. Then I saw the photograph placed so carefully in the fold. He wanted me to find it. He wanted me frightened enough to beg. That was still control, only dressed as sadness. I put the apron back without touching the picture and closed the box. The next morning, Mrs. Alvarez arrived with 12 more boxes and a roll of blue labels. She was 70, owned the small rental cottage behind her house, and treated Grant like the son who remembered her furnace filter. She carried the boxes past me toward the garage. When I asked what they were for, she said Grant knew. Of course he knew. Everyone on the street went to my husband for practical favors. I created the community, but he controlled its screws and hinges. Ryan became difficult that week. His replies grew shorter. He skipped our final lighting test and told me Grant had already shown him where the cables should run. When I asked whether Grant had been talking about our marriage, Ryan said only that Grant had been honest with him. I demanded details. Ryan refused. I accused him of becoming another cautious man who wanted a confident woman until confidence made him uncomfortable. He said confidence was not the issue. I ended the call before he could define me. Dana was no better. 2 days passed before she answered my message about the grill handover. She said she would attend the barbecue but did not want to participate in a joke about Grant. I reminded her that the joke had been her idea at the planning meeting. She answered that ideas changed when real people started bleeding from them. That sentence sounded borrowed. Grant was reaching into my friendships now. I went back to work. The barbecue would correct the story. People remembered the mood of a room more than the words inside it. If the music was good and Ryan played along, Grant's injured silence would look exactly like what I believed it was, an attempt to punish everyone for enjoying me. I ordered more lights. I moved Ryan's chair beside mine on the patio map. I rehearsed the joke until it sounded effortless. On Friday night, Grant stood at the garage door while I arranged serving bowls. He asked what I expected the party to prove. I told him it would prove our neighbors were not afraid of me, no matter what story he had told them. He gave me that small smile and said the neighbors were capable of deciding why they came. I took that as another weak answer. By the next evening, the yard would be full, Ryan would be at my side, and Grant would finally see who brought life to Hawthorne Circle. Saturday arrived hot and bright. Smoke stayed low beneath the maple trees. Children ran between the tables, and every glass light came on at 7. I wore red because it photographed well against green. That was professional knowledge. Grant wore a grey shirt and the mustard yellow apron. He had removed it from the box without mentioning the photograph. The sight pleased me. It meant my little warning had worked. He was back at the grill, back in his place, doing the job he understood. Most of the neighbours arrived within 30 minutes. Ellen came with her son. Mrs. Alvarez brought a potato dish and left her garage door open across the street. The Morgan brothers parked their pickups facing out, although there was more room to turn around near the cul-de-sac. A white rental van sat behind Mrs. Alvarez's hedge. I assumed her nephew was moving furniture again. Grant greeted each person by name. Some touched his shoulder. Others asked whether he needed anything later. I thought he had recruited too many people for cleanup, which was typical. One man could not trust a trash bag without a committee. Dana arrived alone and hugged me quickly. When she moved Ryan's place card to the end of the table, I returned it beside mine. She asked whether I was sure. I told her certainty was why people followed me. Ryan came at 7:15 with a bottle of wine. He looked good in a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. I took his arm and guided him through the yard, introducing him as the man responsible for the patio design. That was generous. I had done most of the work, but I wanted him visible. He thanked people and kept glancing toward Grant. I asked whether my husband had warned him to stay away from me. Ryan said Grant had never ordered him to do anything. He simply knew where he stood. I smiled and said I could change that. Ryan removed my hand from his sleeve carefully. He said we should keep the evening simple. I heard fear. Men liked bold women until another man could see them being liked back. I led him to the drinks table. When he complimented the lights, I told him Grant had wanted plain bulbs because imagination made him nervous. Ryan did not laugh. Dana looked into her cup. Ellen turned toward the grill. The room was not warming the way I had planned, so I increased the pressure. I told a story about Grant measuring burger temperatures during our honeymoon cabin trip. Then I added that he had probably married me because choosing a wife from one exciting evening would have required instinct. 2 people smiled. Nobody laughed loudly. Grant set down the spatula. He wiped his hands and came across the patio. His face was calm. The patient smile waited at one corner of his mouth. He asked me to speak with him inside for 5 minutes. The request was quiet enough that only Ryan, Dana, and Ellen could hear it. I asked why. Grant said he was giving me one last private place to stop. That phrasing angered me. It made him sound generous. It made me sound dangerous. I told him I was hosting 40 people and would not abandon them because he had chosen another bad mood. He said the guests would be fine. Then he asked me not to use Ryan or him for the moment I was planning. So he did know. Someone had betrayed me, probably Dana. I looked at Ryan. He stared at the grass. Dana had already moved 3 steps toward the side gate. The whole arrangement felt like Grant's room now. I had worked for weeks, yet he stood there making everyone wait for his permission. I said the one thing he could not deny. I told him he had spent years giving the best part of himself to broken pipes, damaged roofs, and every neighbor who called. When I was lonely, he gave me calendars. When I wanted desire, he gave me reservations. He had loved me with labor and expected me to live without presence. Grant did not answer at once. The smile left his face. He said that was true. He had hidden inside useful work because feelings did not come with instructions, and by the time he understood what it cost, I had learned to punish him for the same flaw that once made me feel safe. For half a second, the yard disappeared from my attention. There was only Grant, tired and honest, offering me the exact sentence I had demanded for years. Then a child knocked over a cup. Several people turned. I saw the audience again. An honest answer in private would have mattered. An honest answer after he had made me look cruel felt like strategy. I told him confession did not earn control of my party. He asked me once more to come inside and end the performance. I refused. Instead, I raised my glass and called everyone closer to the grill. I said Hawthorne Circle deserved a grill captain who understood heat without treating dinner like a building inspection. Then I laughed and told the circle that my stupid husband could turn a burger into an engineering project, while Ryan understood that women wanted excitement, not another list. Grant stood 10 feet away with a paper plate in one hand. I walked to him, slowly. The apron strings were tied at his back. I reached around his waist, pulled them loose, and lifted the yellow fabric over his head. His arms stayed at his sides. That stillness made me bolder. I carried the apron to Ryan. He stepped back. I followed. Several neighbors watched without touching their food. I told Ryan not to be shy and said everyone already knew he had brought more energy to the street in 6 weeks than Grant had brought in 12 years. Then I tied the apron around Ryan's waist. The black-stitched grill rested, crooked across his chest. I placed the tongs in his hand and said perhaps he could show my husband how a real man handled both fire and a woman. No one laughed. A low guitar filled the silence. Grant looked at Ryan, then at me. His patient smile returned. He asked whether I was certain this was the person I wanted to be in front of everyone. I told him I had never been more certain. He asked whether I wanted him to stop standing in my way. I said yes. Grant nodded. He told me he would handle the rest properly. Then he placed his paper plate beside the grill and laid the spatula across it in a straight line. I heard surrender in every word. Of course I did. For years, he had ended conflict by becoming useful. Now he was cleaning his own defeat. I reached for Dana with my eyes. Her chair was empty. A message I sent stayed unread. That did not matter. Ryan still wore the apron. The lights were perfect. The whole street had heard me say what they were too polite to admit. I turned the music higher and told everyone the uncomfortable part was over. Grant walked toward the side gate. I lifted my glass to Ryan, certain the next laugh would belong to me. Grant stopped with one hand on the gate. Then he turned and gave me that small, patient smile. This time, nobody mistook it for weakness. He told the neighbors he was ready. Ellen's son crossed the yard first. Mrs. Alvarez followed him into our garage. The Morgan brothers opened the side gate wide enough to carry boxes through. Across the street, the white rental van started, and its rear doors swung open. My glass stayed against my mouth. I did not drink. Grant explained only what everyone else already knew. The names he had asked me to confirm were the people willing to help him move. The cars facing out were ready to follow the van. Ryan's calls about the broken sprinkler had become honest conversations about our house. Mrs. Alvarez's boxes were never for charity. The questions about who could stay late had never been about trash. He had told them the real story one person at a time. Not a speech. Not a campaign. He had described what I said, what he asked me to stop, and what happened after. Then he had asked for practical help. That was the language Grant trusted. He admitted that he had spoken to them before telling me he planned to leave. He said private talks between us no longer stayed private in meaning because I retold them until his boundary became another joke. That was his cruelty, if he had one. He had chosen silence, prepared an exit, and let me keep performing inside a marriage he had already stopped trying to repair. For once, he did not deny being cold. He only said coldness was the last place where I could no longer move him. I set my glass on the drinks table. My hand remained around the stem while neighbors passed me, carrying his books, his tool cases, and the clear bags of winter coats. Nobody looked excited. That made it worse. They moved with the calm of people completing a promise. I tried to tell Ellen that Grant had planned a public punishment. She lifted one end of a box and said the barbecue was mine, but the decision to leave belonged to him. Her voice did not rise. My version found nowhere to land. Ryan removed the yellow apron. He folded it once, placed it over the fence, and set the tongs beneath it. Then he told Grant he would drive behind the rental van. He did not look at me again. I searched for Dana. Her cup sat beneath her chair, but she had already gone through the front gate. Grant's petition for dissolution arrived 2 days later, with mediation scheduled for the following month. Grant moved into Mrs. Alvarez's cottage while he searched for a permanent place. My share of the household costs doubled because the quiet labor I mocked had included repairs, insurance calls, and every unpaid favor that kept our home running. Ellen stopped inviting me for Sunday coffee. Dana answered once in 3 weeks, and the Morgan brothers no longer waved when I drove past. Ryan sold number 18 before winter and left the neighborhood without giving me his new address. At work, a photograph of me tying the apron around Ryan reached a community partner, and I was removed from public events for the rest of the quarter. I had believed attention meant power. At the barbecue, every face was turned toward me, exactly as I wanted. But attention was only light. It showed the whole street which person had built a community and which person had merely learned how to stand in the center of one. The mustard yellow apron stayed over the fence until rain darkened the stitched grill. Everyone followed Grant past the cold barbecue, and the only thing left wearing his place was the apron I had tied on another man.